Okay, we're going to continue the Rebbe's Verbringen from Chof of Tafshin Yud. Again, this is a Skashers Verbringen, so the ideas are chazak, stark. We're holding Sifta Zayin. This that the Rebbe spoke about in the beginning of the Siyum of Mesachas Kiddushin, that when it talks to the Bryce about that the work gets done by others, which is the level of Shim Bar Yochai, which is the higher level, where if a person totally doesn't subscribe to the limitations of the world, so then it's not that you're sort of say that your vocation is something of Torah. Your life is Torah, and Hashem takes care of how you provide yourself in Parnasa. You can apply this to what we find. A specific point the Rebbe points out from the Alter Rebbe in the laws of the Talmud Torah, the laws of studying Torah, which is a very famous part of the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch Hilchos Talmud Torah, which I believe, if not mistaken, was shown to the Goin of Vilna, the Gra, and he didn't without Be'ilim Shem, without knowing who it was. He was very impressed when the time he found out that it was written by the Alter Rebbe. He was already persuaded by those who were anti-chassid, and anti-Alter Rebbe, and he couldn't be makabelit. But I believe he saw the Hilchos Talmud Torah. The Alter Rebbe says, the Alter Rebbe writes, if you're a person that your work gets done by others, you have an obligation, it's obligatory for you to study Torah or to be engaged in the study of Torah day and night, mamish. And he has the word mamish, like not theoretically, but actually. Behegdin, we know that the Alter Rebbe, when he adds the word mamish and other things, what the previous Rebbe says, in a letter of the Frierdiker Rebbe. And the Rebbe says, I will give eventually this letter to be published. Let's see, 76 when it was published. It was later published in Egeres HaKodesh Chelik Dalit and printed in the Hayom Yom. What? Bibir Divrei Admira Hazakin Betanya. This is the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya. Shaneshama, that this Jewish soul is a Chelik Elikai, a portion of God. Mimal, which is a pasuk. Chelik Mimal is a pasuk. And the Alter Rebbe adds the word mamish. Shahanoisim betevis mimal betevis mamish heim helfchin. The idea of mamish and mimal mean two separate things. Mimal is the soul is so elevated. Mamish is so good, it's so practical within this world. Meaning, ki mimal toirei ruchnish beruchnis. Mimal means that the soul is spiritual of all spiritualities. Umamish, and the definition of mamish means gashmish or begashmish, that the soul is actually physically in a body, and the way it is in the body, it's a chelik elikai, it's a portion of God. Zalmalis nefesh Hashem, is that's the whole point of the godly soul. Shemiyoyse ruchnish beruchnius, the notwithstanding of its most highest elevated spiritual existence and source, payelis begashim shor gashmius, it's effective in the most physical sense. Chibur veis ksavis efachim, to combine these two opposites. The Rebbe adds, we could add, by Safatevis Mamish, this is what the Alter Rebbe adds, that a person who was Melach Tachanun de'acher, that if your work is being done by others and you don't have the concern of earning a living, so then you have an obligation to be ma'asik, to be engaged in Talmud Torah day and night, and he adds the word Mamish. But again, a person whose work is done by others has an obligatory obligation to be engaged in Torah study day and night, mamish. Reim is Adar Zak, and the Alter Rebbe means to point out the Chibur Beis Haksavas Enat, at the same point that he means in Tanya, like that Frierdiker Rebbe says. Shegashim shebegashmis and megashim shebegashmis mamish oisim ruchnis beruchnis. The learning of Torah should be in a way that it permeates the physical. The most physical is permeated to the most highest level of ruchnis. Toiris Rebbe Nehiroi, like the idea of Rebbe Nehiroi, which is the author of this opinion in the Braisa, Berashbi and Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, Shibloi Hefsek Yomim V'Layla Mamish, that you don't separate day and night, and your Torah is totally engaged within worldly things in a way of Mamish, which is Mamish into the Gashmis of it. That's why the Mishnah says, Matzinu Sha'asa Avram Avinu's Kol Torah Kul Achlei Nitna. We find that Avram Avinu performed all the Torah mitzvahs before the Torah was given. Famous idea. The like Lashon HaGemara B'Yuma Kayim. So we said he doesn't use the word that he fulfilled, but he did. Kayim is like he was fulfilled, is the Hebrew word for fulfilling a mitzvah. But Oisa means he made the mitzvah. What's the difference? The Rebbe says, what's the difference between Kayim La'aseh, to fulfill and to do? The Pashtus, the simple difference is Shekiyim hu b'davar sheyesh nekvar. L'am shachach tasha. Kiyim is, the Rebbe says, is a terminology one would use to fulfill something that's there. You're not creating something new. It's kiyum. You're doing. It means like someone who's like jumping on board the train of mitzvahs. The mitzvahs, the train is there, but you're jumping on board. To create something is to make something new. With the Gemasi b'Torah, so too when it comes to Torah, mashkasa v'sein chelkeinu, to give our portion in Torah b'Torah Sicha. Chelkeinu daike shlachurav shlachol echad Yisrael yesh chelik b'Torah sh'tzarech la'asosei. That every person has their portion of Torah that they have to create. To bring it down and to reveal it. What was Avram Avinu's unique? His Asa Avram Avinu's Kol Torah. He was able to do the whole Torah. That all parts of Torah he was able to bring down to this world, even though it wasn't given yet, because Matan Torah, of course, happened many years later. This is what we said before, that the uniqueness of learning the Bryce is a way of a person who's learning Torah for the sake of Torah Mamish Lishmah. Not that you're learning Torah Lishmah, but eventually it becomes a vocation. So why does it say Asa? That God, that Avram Avinu did, as if he created. When you're talking about the mission, when the mission is not learning around the level, we're not referring to the level of Talmud Torah like we are referring to the Brisa, which is more of a unique person that's able to is doing Torah on the level of Rashbi, where they're totally disconnected from the world. They're talking about most people. And Avram Avinu is saying also as if he created something new. There's an idea that's brought down by Shimshon the Astropolis. What does he say? I think he was a Rebbe in the times of the Alter Rebbe, maybe a little later. The Frierdiker Rebbe quotes this idea from Reb Shimshon Astropolis in the Pesach of the year Tafresh Tzadik Dal in 1890. No, not 18. Tafresh Pei is 1920. It's not 1834. That Toiva haprecious imabrius v'abedidus b'tech b'niyad. That he says. Toiva precious imabrius, to better be separate, to be separate. For precious like Potter, someone who's separate amongst the people, and the loneliness amongst within the people. So precious imabrius, to be precious with the creation, and the bedidus, didud is loneliness, or to be alone amongst people, meaning I have to check what exactly the idea is. What is the idea of the way most people learn Torah, like is described in the Mishnah? Is how you go about engaging in the world. It means you're changing the world. You're elevating your body and your animalistic soul. You take something that's megushim, something that's physical, like your nefesh habahamis and your body, and to make it spiritual. When we talk about the Brisa, that's where the soul is working. As we said, you're not subscribing to the world, so therefore you're not engaging in the world. Like the Alter Rebbe writes in the Kutei Torah and in Shmini, he talks about the Rashbi. The Rashbi was like a Nuni Yoime. He was kind of tzaddik that didn't have the physical ability to do mitzvahs because he was just in a cave. He had no wine. The Alter Rebbe says he had no sukkah, he had no lulav. His askusa, all he did is study Torah. He was only able to perform the mitzvahs in a ruchnistic way, in a spiritual way. He didn't have the physical ability because he was limited. What he had nothing. He had boxer and water. He had carobs and water. So the beer, the Alter Rebbe says that even though in the main part of the mind, the Alter Rebbe describes how the Nuni Yoima, the spiritual tzaddik, is much higher, but in the beer, the Alter Rebbe actually talks about the idea of doing the physical mitzvah. Because although Rashbi was very holy, and what he did Baruch was holy, but he wasn't able to do begashmis. And the idea is to do things begashmis in this world. Because it's specifically the point is to actually engage in your body, like the Baal Shem Tov teaches, and to turn it into Ozav Tazavim, to turn that into something of holy. Like the Alter Rebbe explains, like I said, in the Kutei Torah, in the mile of the Sharabar, especially, he talks about the mile in the beer. The Kach Nemer, the Mishnah Lashon Asay Dafka, that's what it means in the Mishnah when it's talking most people, and most people are dealing with the Toich B'nei Adam, they're dealing with themselves. So they have to go out there and deal with their Nefesh Bahamas, and then they're making something, they're changing the Nefesh Bahamas, and they're goofing to something holy. Because actually, when you're talking about the soul, then it's kiyum, because the soul was always spiritual, but to turn something, the chidush, and the chiddush is to turn something gashmis into ruchnis, and that's why it says Avram Vinu Asa, he made something. What did he make? When he was actually doing something to pu'ula, which most people do, which is engaging in their physicality. It's greater what tzaddikim accomplished, and what heaven and earth accomplished, the creation of heaven and earth. We're taking something and making it into nothing. Sorry, from nothing into something. And you take the something of the world and turn it into nothing. But that's a chiddush. It's a greater accomplishment. We talked about Rabbi Chinun Medaisa when he was gifted the golden foot. At first there was two miracles. One miracle was he was given the golden foot. And when his wife had a dream that it was going to affect their portion of the world to come, she said, send it back. And the Gemara says that the second miracle is a greater miracle. Why? Because God gives, but to take back, to make something into Gashmis is one thing, but to take Gashmis and make it into Ruchnis, because from heaven they give, but they don't take back. So when could turn the yesh, the gold, and give it back to heaven, that's the true chiddush. Now the Rebbe brings it home to the ideas of Iskashrus. I think we're going to try to finish to the end of this talk. Okay, well, we'll get to the Sicha and the best that we can. This idea we find by Rebbe and a chassid. Rebbe and chassidim. A Rebbe knows in kol chassidim. A Rebbe gives the ability, the tools, the koichas, that the chassidim, those who are connected. No matter what situation you are, whether you find yourself, you put yourself. If you're a chassid, by definition, a chassid has the ability, has the tools, and has the how to turn gashmis into ruchnis. No matter what your situation is, no matter where you are. Not only just to turn gashmis into ruchnis, but even more, to be able to be effective ala zulas on someone else, to turn that person into a new person, a new being. A Rebbe Amir, the Rebbe used to say, means the Rebbe is quoting his father, the previous Rebbe. That I could say, we said this before, that we could say about the lowliest of you. Zutra means the smallest of you. You're able to resurrect the dead. What does it mean to resurrect the dead? To turn someone into chassid. Make someone into chassid. Al chassid mishamadin razakin. Talk about the chassid Alter Rebbe. And if it's talking about the chassid Alter Rebbe, we can't say that the Alter Rebbe had chassidim that could be Machai Mason, that could resurrect the dead. Where our Rebbe has chassidim that, how can we compare ourselves? We learned about this before. But the Alter Rebbe, that the Rebbe says you can't just worry about getting ready for yachidus and getting ready. We have to go in right away. Harigam chassidim shal Rebbe, even the Rebbe's chassidim. This applies to us today, sitting here learning the Sicha now. Even if you think you're small, Rebbe, you've received from the Rebbe, if you're a chassid and you're a kosher, you've received from the Rebbe the koyach, the hachias mesim, to resurrect the dead within you and the dead within someone else. And to give birth to a new person. In Bli habit, the Rebbe says, notwithstanding how you were before this. The Rebbe looked at you. And some of us were zeichel, the Rebbe physically looked at us. But today, after Gimel Tammuz, those who weren't by the Rebbe physically, or those who were born after Gimel Tammuz, the Rebbe is looking from above. The Rebbe had the Rebbe gave a look. With that look, I went by the Rebbe many times. The look, I was zeichel to go by the Rebbe in Tafshin And Dalit, after the stroke, I went upstairs. I was upstairs by the Rebbe's room. When the Rebbe's a small room in the back of 770 after the stroke, the Rebbe would come out. It was Simchas Torah day. The Rebbe was holding a bottle of vodka. I'll never forget the look. The Rebbe was looking at me as he poured me vodka, which was unusual. But the Rebbe says, the Rebbe, cook again. And when the Rebbe gives you a look, that empowers you. And not just empowers you to change yourself or to work on yourself, but to change others. Yesh lavi dugmal dover. Mashakose beitz chaim, shebeitz es bas ha'yona, noda efreich idei stalkus manrav, the certain kind of egg of a certain bird. To check what the bas ya'ona is, the type of bird it exactly is. But there's a concept in Chassidus that talks about intimacy or the ability to create through a stalkus. In Chassidus it talks about relationships between, let's say, a man and a woman. There's what's called the kissing, and there's intercourse, and then there's looking. And this idea of looking, like it says about doves, the Alter Rebbe quotes many times, the doves look at each other. Their love is expressed not through intercourse or kissing, but through looking. So there's also ability to give birth through looking. The Eitz Chaim talks about the bas ha'ya'ana, the kind of bird that noil the ha'efrach hadei stalkus manrav. You give birth to a chick through looking at, I guess, looking at the egg. The kuntis avoida meduber oides goydel has hiris merius tvar biltir tzur. Rebbe Shab, in one of his famous essays, the essays of kuntis avoida, which is right after the name is Kishmoy Kain, who is a kuntis about avoida, about tremendous effort and work a person has to work on themselves. He talks about a person guarding to look at things we shouldn't look at. That doesn't just mean, it means all kind of things you should look at and how you look at things. Even if you're looking at something that's not something that's beneath you, but you're looking at it, it has effect. Even looking has an effect. The idea is like it says in Eitz Chaim, there's looking at an egg that could hatch the egg. So we see looking has an effect. When the Rebbe was trying to say, he's going to start off the power of the power of tuma in looking at things we shouldn't look at. So even more so has to be the power of Kiddushin. So if the Rebbe, if the Yegiah cook, he can make you into something. He can make you into like the bas ya'ana, which becomes an efrach. Through looking, he can make you, empowers you to be a person that can affect yourself and others. Because looking has an effect. Torah talks about in Bereshis, Shechet Adam Rishon Bakat Eitzah Mizeh Shistak Umakam Klipos. Adam Rishon was in Gan Eden. He was beyond, like it says about the story of the Nachash. The Nachash couldn't take that Adam Avinu wasn't Messiachas to him. He didn't care about him, so he did everything to get attention. The snake was lacking. He felt he didn't matter. That Adam didn't care. He exists, and Adam doesn't even know he exists. He couldn't take it. So finally, at least he says that it's brought out of it that Adam Rishon started his first sin once. He said, "I have nothing to do with klipa, but let me look at klipa. Let me see what it is. What are we talking about here? What is this? Like you go to the supermarket. Those of us who don't live in. When I lived in Seattle, you live in places that are not all kosher food. So you walk by the kosher section and pre-packed meat that's packed a year ago. And so it's always as red as any, who knows what's going on over there. Then you walk by the non-kosher section, you look at the steaks, you give a look at the non-kosher section. So it says, the Adam Rishon give a look. Even if you weren't even looking to be effective, it wasn't like you were looking for a reason, you just looked. It has an effect. And look what happened. Adam Rishon, it brought him down, and it brought him to the sin of the Eitz Hadas. So the Alter Rebbe says, so if we're talking about negative, the power of a look, you weren't looking for it as an way of engaging. You're just looking to see as a bystander, right? You're just walking by the non-kosher sections, just looking at it. The price is 20, 30, 50% less, and it looks nice. Maybe possibly looks better. You're not the chassid you're going to buy it. So you're looking. The Riyashal Kedusha. So even more so when the Rebbe looks at you. We talk about he's not looking at you casually. He's looking at you to be effective. There are certain times the Rebbe would look, all the time the Rebbe would look. But there are certain times the Rebbe would specifically look, like after Tkis Shofar and after Simchas Torah, after Akafis. I always say that when I was in school in yeshiva then was on Shroy Avenue, which is all the way. Those who know Crown Heights, those days was all the way. Now Crown Heights grew in the 90s, so I was in yeshiva on Shroy Avenue. And we had a break for an hour for Mincha, Mincha and lunch. So I would walk always, we had an apartment in Eastern Parkway, so I would walk up Albany from Troy towards, from Empire towards towards Eastern Parkway. The Rebbe would be going a lot of times then to the mikveh in Albany, this Albany mikveh, many times. I would see the Rebbe driving out because those hours the Rebbe would go to the mikveh and then go to the oil. Whenever it was that the Rebbe was driving those days, again, car nights were smaller, it was very possible I was the only person on the street. So I'm standing, because if you see the Rebbe coming in his car and the Rebbe going to his car, going and driving, you don't just keep on walking, you stop. So the Rebbe's driving, the Rebbe's driver, usually Rebbe Krinsky, Rebbe Cohen, I think usually would be driving towards Empire, and I was walking up towards Kingston, towards Eastern Parkway, so we're going different directions, and the car's going down, and the Rebbe would always look at me. And the Rebbe never put his back. He would look, he'd turn his head, look. The Rebbe was very into the idea of a cook, of a look. So here the Rebbe says, if you're talking about things you shouldn't be looking at, and we're talking about a person just casually looking, you're not looking because you want to do something about it. You're just looking. Vivada says, surely, when there's a holy cook, and the Rebbe does want to be effective. He has his intention is to affect you. Like when the Rebbe is looking at a chassid, even if you don't even realize the Rebbe is looking at you. You don't even realize the Rebbe is looking at you to be effective, that you should change, you should be empowered. Allah come even more so. You're going to have the effect, and you're going to have the tools now. That you can give birth to new children, mason spiritually to resurrect the dead. If the bird is able to hatch an egg, even more so chassid. The Rebbe tells the story that the Rebbe Shab was looking at someone. I said Simchas Torah is a time for looking. That chassid later went to America. And we know all the challenges that the Rebbe talks about. We talk about in the history of the chassidim had in the early years of America to stay from. But because the Rebbe Shab looked at him, Simchas Torah, the Rebbe says that he was able to stay and not get kind of watered down with the age of America. Now the Rebbe says the famous story. You do a gamma sipers, the famous story should be Adam Zakim and Massive. When the Alter Rebbe was in prison, and he was being taken back and forth and being questioned over there by the ministers, and he even met the Tsar. So the famous story is he saw one of the Tsar Nicholases as a kid. Means there wasn't the Tsar at the time, but he later became a Tsar. I think that was the Tsar in the time of tzaddik, which had very harsh decrees against the Jews and the Kantanistim. But it says that he bit al Nikolai, the Alter Rebbe looked at this little child Nikolai, and as bad as he was, he would have been a lot worse. And Alter Rebbe looked at him and weakened his ability to be active klipa. Later, when he became Tsar, king, his ability to be Tomei was weakened by the fact that Alter Rebbe looked at him. The Asam comes again surely, but again, we're talking about a goy. Here we're talking about a yid. Rebbe looks at a chassid, at a yid. Sheyesh by nefesh alikis, that person's not a goy, but he has a godly soul. It's always, the soul is always with God. That the Rebbe's look at a yid, at a chassid, affects that person for many years. Then not only does it empower us, and we shouldn't get affected and overwhelmed by others and say, oh, yeah, I can't, how can I be from? Oh, yeah, how can I send my kids to Jewish education? Oh, yeah, how can I be a chassid? I'm out there here, I'm out there. On the contrary, that you should be effective. Even if it's coming from family, that you need to be strong. It's chassidim shal Rebbe to be a chassid Rebbe. The Rebbe continues, this power that the Rebbe gives a chassid. It's not even important about what kind of chassid you are. Maybe you can say that's the talk about the Rebbe looked at a special chassid. I'm a nobody. No matter what your situation is, the Rebbe says. The Rebbe is beyond the levels. The Rebbe is looking at a chassid no matter what you think you are, even if you're right. Not necessarily you are right, but even if you're right to think that you're maybe a nothing, the Rebbe looks at you as Mukasher, gives you koiches. The kindness of Son, and he gives you the ability to fulfill what he has expectations of you. Reciting ha'atzmus la'asis megashes ruchnis, the central want of a Rebbe, which is to turn physicality into spiritual. Yeshna ke'ela, there are those should be yosim in kaima shlei ha'yachem litva b'mikvah, when they couldn't go to a mikvah. We all experienced that in COVID, right? You couldn't go to the mikvah. Nimnum biglazel l'kaim tafkidim shlichusim imilir tzarich shal Rebbe. He said, I can't do what the Rebbe wants because I can't go to the mikveh. Aval embassy, the Rebbe says, what kind of shtus is that? No matter what, even if you think, how could I go to, if I didn't get to the mikveh, how could I do what the Rebbe wants of me? I need to go to the mikveh. Famous pasuk. It's quoted many times. This was quoted again during COVID when people thought, I can't do if I don't go to the mikveh. God is not limited. Even if you're tummy, you can't go to the mikveh. Whatever the reason is, Hashem is with you. We have to connect ourselves, get close to the Rebbe. It's Sire Pun of visualize the Rebbe's image. The Rebbe, we have pictures, we have videos, Baruch Hashem, but study the Torah of the Rebbe. Even if you're finding yourself sick, spiritually sick, not only in a situation of suffering or age, but even when you're spiritually sick, the fact that you learn the Rebbe's Torah is going to stand with you. To fulfill our job and our mission, what the Rebbe has in intentions for us. What is life? Life is holiness. Before Rebbe, the Rosh Hashanah, Moiseh, Sicha, Yigim Thomas, like the Rebbe says, I'm assuming Tachanun test in the Sichas and the Maimorim. Yes, we spoke about that idea of long life and everlasting life, until eternity. You have to be a vessel. You should become a vessel and have a vessel. What makes you a vessel? You have to study the Torah of the Rebbe. You have to study the Rebbe's chassidus and Maimorim and Sichas. It's your fun of connecting and knowing it's not just a study or a read. You're reading in order to be makusha and visualize the Rebbe sitting there, listening or watching a video. The idea is the Rebbe should pull himself to us, to him. We're going to see the Rebbe, now we're holding Chof, when the Rebbe starts talking the Fabrengen of Melech Basada, of Parshas of Chayel of that year, which we're going to learn either next, or we may just learn the Parshas Rei. I'm not sure we could go to Rei because we may have to skip it, but if we're going to do parts of Rei, but Chayel, we're surely going to learn where the Rebbe talks about major skashas of Melech Basada, and what's that mean with the skashas. The Daimaskus Sharebi Yala Oise love, Hanish Bioise Beguf at Mer Besim Shana Yisala Larabi, Kfish Nimsa Bishmesh Shemaim, Shmesh Shemaim Yeshna Gam Khan. The Rebbe says the heaven is still with us, and the Rebbe is elevating higher and higher and higher. Of course, like I said, the whole idea of learning the Sichos is because they apply to us now. After Gimel Tammuz, we may think all these thoughts. We have to know that the Rebbe is with us, and the Rebbe is looking at us and looked at us. If he looked at us physically or he looked at us from above, he empowered us and he takes us with us. But you have to make a kelim. The keli is to learn the Rebbe's chassidus. All right, today's Wednesday. Hopefully, maybe we can finish this whole Chof before